A special hello and welcome to friends, colleagues, and folks from around the world who are joining us today for our panel on designing for learning in immersive education. I must say that I am incredibly energized and excited by the conversations that I've been hearing and part of at the GatherVerse Summit this year. Especially the focus on technology for uplifting humanity and mindfulness, and to address problems of learning in schools, and to solve global issues, and for building community. We are really excited to share today on this panel on designing for learning, which aligns with the mission for building a humanity first metaverse. And you will hear us talk about the need to design for all of life. Before we begin our panel and our discussion today, I would like you to get to know our panelists a little bit better. So I will invite you all to introduce yourself a bit. And I'm going to start with Quincy Wang.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Paula. I'm a PhD student in the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University, Canada. My research focuses on immersive learning experiences with augmented reality and virtual reality and the learning sciences. In the past 2 years, I presented my research papers at the Immersive Learning Research Network Worldwide conferences. And currently, I'm a research collaborator and a co-applicant on Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. The major two funded project is to apply immersive technology in Indigenous education and social science, social inclusion studies.
Wonderful. And where are you joining us from, Quincy?
Canada, Vancouver, BC.
Thanks. And next, Lorelle VanFossen. Let's hear an introduction from you and share where you are in the world.
Hi. Well, I'm part of Educators in VR, and we're a membership organization with over 4,000 members dedicated to integrating immersive technology into education. And my company is based in Wales in the UK, but I am in Portland, Oregon.
Excellent. And Karen, I'm going to see if you're able
to go to Karen last.
Okay, we'll put you in last.
Problem. Yeah, she's having some internet things. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is the world we live in. There was a storm and she's had some internet issues. So fingers crossed she'll be able to join us. Camilla Lee, let's tell us about yourself and where you are today.
Yeah, hi, I'm Camilla Lee. I'm an instructional designer and research associate at the MIT Teaching Systems Lab. And my past research aimed to understand how to optimize learning in immersive virtual reality to help students gain conceptual knowledge of cells and to look at the impact of instructional design on learning in VR. And right now I am in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Wonderful. Thanks for that introduction. And Meredith Thompson.
Hello, everybody. Meredith Thompson, and I'm calling just from north of Boston. And I am a user researcher at Meta now, and I've done research in using VR for learning. And very excited to be here on the panel today. My background is from the game that we've done a lot of research on and that we'll talk about today called Cellverse. It's about learning virtual reality through virtual reality. And I'm excited we had a wonderful time collaborating to work on the book together with Paula and other folks. And Camilla and I worked together on that, and really excited to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And we do hope our panelist, Karen Gibson Highlands, is going to be able to join us. And I will just say about Karen, she is one of the most brilliant virtual world builders that I've ever met. And that's how she became my friend. And I am just...
There she is.
Here she is. Let's see if she's able. Karen, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. It sounds a bit kind of robotic. I think it must be my internet. Can you hear me okay?
You sound lovely. And
Okay.
we're just giving introductions, and I wasn't sure where you would be at. So I took the liberty of saying you're one of the most brilliant world builders that I've come across, and Lorelle is nodding her head in agreement. So we're happy that you're able to join us. And do you want to add a little bit more about yourself?
Okay. Did you want me to introduce myself? Sorry, it's really hard to hear you. Yeah.
Yes,
okay, yeah,
that would be wonderful.
I'm Karen Gibson-Harnans. I work in the academic registry department at the University of Law. I actually work from home as I live in a remote area of Scotland. So I like moderating events for educators in VR, and I also build educational virtual worlds, as Paula said. I'm now planning to learn how to build worlds using Unity so that I can build worlds on other platforms.
Thank you for that introduction. And just to get us started, so the panelists here today are all authors in a new book that is called Immersive Education, Designing for Learning. And this book focuses on designing and being a designer of immersive education. It introduces readers to the human experiences within immersive learning environments. And what is special about this book is it is full of rich examples of immersive learning in real world context in schools, K-12, post-secondary, online events, online graduate courses. So real world context, not carefully controlled, isolated lab studies. Here in this book, we're using immersive education where learning is complex, messy, and just also very engaging and embodied and creative and inspiring. So we are sharing some chapters from this book, and we are going to talk about some of the chapters. And then we have some questions prepared to talk about designing for learning. And we will wrap up our panel with some rapid fire questions at the end. So I hope you're really going to enjoy our session today. We're going to begin with a little bit of discussion around pegs. So this is a chapter by Meredith and Camilla, and I'll let them tell you what pegs is, but their chapter is just a short abstract. As virtual reality becomes more affordable and available, educators need to understand how to evaluate VR experiences and how to best incorporate them in their classes. This chapter suggests that through presence and agency, incorporating VR experiences using pegs will guide you in a really good way. So Meredith and Camilla, tell us a little bit more about your chapter. What's the highlight? What's the significance?
Great. I'm going to start, and then I'll hand the baton to Camilla. Basically, the chapter PEG stands for pre-training, exploration, goal orientation, and segmentation, and we are using those to manage cognitive load in immersive environments. So this chapter is inspired from actual experience developing, testing, and trying out a VR-based cellular biology game. Imagine learning about cells by being inside of one. And here's an example of the complex environment that students encounter when they enter Cellverse. We developed the game with teachers and students and tried it out in actual schools. And so the learning from the chapter really comes from that lived experience of designing, developing, testing, trying, learning, redesigning a game that is immersive, a game that's in VR. We developed specific strategies that have worked with actual teachers, and a couple of them include pre-training before the session begins. So one of the superpowers of immersive learning is that it is immersive is that it has potentially a rich learning experience where you're looking and actually in the world, you feel that you're present in a virtual world. But that also has a flip side in that it can be cognitively overwhelming. And so a couple of the strategies that we've found, one is pre-training before the session begins. So for example, in CellVerse, what you would do is actually give students a schematic of what they should expect inside the cell, so that then when they go into the immersive and rich environment, they actually have an understanding and connect the dots between what it is that we want them to learn and what they're actually seeing. The other thing that we think about is segmentation of the experience. So immersive learning can be it can be, I would say necessarily, what you want to do is you want to introduce it in segments. You don't necessarily want to have a huge, long experience in VR. And so one of the strategies that teachers have used successfully is this idea of segmentation. And so pre-training and segmentation are the P and the S of PEGs. And I'm going to hand it over to Camilla to talk about the E and the G.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. So actually, before I even start, I think there's like a myth around learning in VR, where a lot of people might think that technology or VR by itself is so powerful that by itself can revolutionize education and the learning experience. And that's why actually 2 summers ago with Meredith, I designed a pilot study. And the pilot study was to look at the role of instructional design in learning. So the G is for goal orientation and the E is for exploration. So my study aimed to understand how to optimize learning in a VR environment to help students gain knowledge of cells. And the pilot study was conducted with 6 participants who experienced the VR game CellVerse that Meredith talked about. And both groups went through CellVerse twice, approximately like 1 week apart. And 3 of the participants were given a goal during their first session to look for a specific organelle, and the other 3 were just told to explore. And then the next week they came back together, and those instructions were switched, and we collected 4 forms of data, which were just like video and audio recordings, some questionnaires, and students got to draw the cell that they experienced before. So we wanted to see if their knowledge of cells grew over time. And so they drew a cell before the experience and after the first exploration or goal experience. And when they came back next week, we wanted to see how much information they retained between the 2 sessions. And we wanted to see if participants continued to learn new information about the cells throughout the study. So that was what my study was about 2 summers ago. And through the experience, we got to learn that participants reported that both the experience and the sessions were useful, but they actually tended to prefer the most recent session, and that suggested a recency effect. And the results from the study also indicated that educators should include multiple sessions of an immersive VR experience to support learning. So that was that was like our pilot study when we were looking at the role of instructional design in learning in VR.
Yeah, thank you, Camilla. And I really appreciate this discussion that you're bringing up around some of the myths around VR and learning and the hype. And quite frankly, that all really needs to die off and go away. And is partly why we've taken the effort to put this book out into the world, is so that there are examples that are rich examples of learning that deal with the realities of the complex contemporary classroom and that have meaningful instructional design like PEGs. So that others can learn from experience, from good experience, and not have to start from the ground up. So I really love in your chapter that it's such an example of what works in immersive education and really meaningful learning. And but it's not sugar coated, like you actually are, you're finding this is the reality of the complex contemporary classroom. So thank you for sharing that. And we're going to move on to Quincy, and I'd like you to talk about your chapter, which involves designing an interactive science exhibit and using augmented reality to increase visitor engagement and to achieve learning outcomes in the context of learning in science world, so in a science center. And in your chapter, I think what is really unique is how the students get to how the AR exhibit really helps them to inspire their curiosity about science, and how the museum exhibits really come to life in a very real way, and in your case, maybe a little bit even scary for some of the learners because it is real life. And I will let you talk about your chapter.
Thank you, Paula, for the introduction. So yeah, so my chapter mainly is describes the collaborative design and development of an augmented reality in a science exhibition to spark learners' curiosity about science. So the topic we choose is bees. Bee is in the threatened right now due to the climate change, and most of the time in the science exhibit, bees are closed during winter. So we think how to utilize immersive technology to address the learning gap. And therefore, we designed a 3D bees that in the augmented reality. So when learners use their own cell phone scan the QR code, they can literally put 3D bee lively in learner's hand. And then they can touch, sense, rotate, and experience, and identify different type of bees shape and their ecology system. So, so we learned that learners are really engaged in an immersive experience. So, and because the science content is augmented and with a really interactive digital experience, we can easily apply this to an interactive learning theory as well. So the final analysis and evaluation from this research are used to suggest a few effective learning development strategies for implement AR into museum. So we mainly use the AD instructional design framework for this design and development process. So, but we also need to emphasize that AD's 5 development phases are not discrete for our case. Instead, they are overlapped with each other to guide the designers, museum curators, software programmers, and multimedia designers to easily make the whole development process under control. And the goal is mainly put learners in the end, in the mind. So yeah, that's my summary.
Thank you, Quincy, and thank you for using very intentional instructional design in your chapter. So Quincy's talking about the ADDIE model, ADDIE, and how she built upon that to do her project and to also do her study in a really good way. And up next, I'm going to ask Lorelle and Karen to talk about their chapter, and their chapter also has a very very powerful instructional design model framework called the DO concept model. And it is, yeah, just something you're all going to learn about today. But their chapter is called Interactive Storytelling Through Immersive Design. And I wanted to read you the abstract, which is linking strong narratives and play. This chapter helps educators and designers take their first steps into immersive education using the DO, D-E-W concept model. The focus is on designing and selecting virtual worlds that break through the rigid classroom structure and offer immersive experiences that enhance learning through discovery, exploration, and wonder. Lorelle and Karen, I will let you talk a bit more about the significance of your chapter.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to writing our book chapter, my particular interest was learning through play. As we know, children tend to learn through play, but this kind of gets lost when we become adults. So we looked at how people seem to find their inner child when they're in virtual worlds, naturally playing and role playing and learning lots while they're doing it. And it's amazing to watch people become totally immersed in an experience. And one of the highlights for me, which we wrote about in our chapter, was watching people in a futuristic world built by one of our great world builders, Darren Gust, where he had a retina scanner outside a door with instructions to scan your retina to gain entry. And although people could have just walked right in, every single person stopped and put their eyes to the scanner for a few seconds before entering the room. And that for me showed how, adults can just like turn into children and just play and learn while they're doing it without actually realizing they're learning. So it's just such a fantastic medium for learning for me.
Oh, Karen, you want to explain DEW?
Yeah,
Please?
I can talk about the
Please.
G model as well. Yeah, it's I mean, giving people the opportunity to play in virtual worlds encourages them to kind of quite naturally explore the world and make new discoveries. And as they do that, it gives them a sense of wonder, which leads them on a continuous path of exploration and discovery. We designed the Dream model to help educators design worlds that will provide just enough guidance or natural kind of pathway design to help people to navigate through a world while giving them enough freedom to encourage them to explore themselves and discover unexpected wonders. And the kind of the self-guided exploration allows people to learn in their own time and makes learning fun, which we think will lead to increased understanding and retention. And our Dream model just helps people to put the kind of structures in place that will make people behave in this way quite naturally.
So DO stands for discovery, exploration, and wonder. And those tie in so closely, as Karen just explained. So we just have a few more points to add, 'cause Karen did such a great job. Is first of all, we developed with a DO concept model, we set up a framework with 8 characteristics and 7 worlds that are designed. They're pretty much every educational world we put through this colander keeps coming out with these are the basic formats of it. So when you understand that if you have these 7 to choose from, basically, and then you can add to them in different ways through the basic characteristics. And we found that the first thing that we had to challenge was people to get past people's fear and different anxiety to make sure that they're engaging. We do that through narrative. We do that through really focusing on the story of what it is. Like with the bees, you have a story that's in there. There's a narrative that goes with it. With the Cellverse, which I love, it's about the story of the cells. You're opening people up to that world so they can understand it and explore it. And as Karen so beautifully said, once you tap into that wonder awe effect, people want to know more, and it encourages that process to keep going and keep going. They're not going to stand there and go, "Oh, it's a bee. It makes honey." Now they're gone. They want to know why. How does it do this? How does it impact this? Why are they important? Why do we need to appreciate this? And the same thing with the cells. Why do we need to understand how important a cell is in the body? Because you're taking a journey and an adventure as you go through it. Huge things. We also explored the fear of the unknown, which is part of onboarding. I live for the day that we can just people can walk into VR and not have to be onboarded. Not, I hate that word. I want that word to die. But to be introduced and to be trained and prepped. I think there needs to be more improvements in smoothing that process so they literally can walk into that experience. I'm waiting for the holodeck, but so are the rest of us. But it takes away energy when you have to learn. So we need to make it a natural experience. We need to focus on showing and not telling. Death to PowerPoint. I love PowerPoint, but why put up slides? Why put up a video when you can have somebody walk through the model and have them move around inside of it? Most of all, what we found through our research over and over and over again is George Lepp, who's a famous photographer and author. He said this, and I said, "Can I steal it?" And he says, "Yes, make it yours." I want to give him still credit for it. He said, if you want to get someone's attention, you need to either show them something they've never seen before or show it to them in a way they've never seen before. And that is what VR does. Anyone can stand around a car and look at it and go, yeah, it's a car, it's an engine. I can take the carburetor out, I can put it back in. But you change people's lives in understanding how a car works when you have them standing in the carburetor, when you have them wander around through all the pipes and the fluids. You're changing their entire perspective, and they want to know more. They learn more, they retain more. And it's that scaffolding that comes in through those perceptions. And that's what we've come up. We took that and applied it to the Do model. We're really excited about helping teachers get past their fear of using VR. They're overwhelmed. Oh my God, I have to learn so much. No, you don't. We can make it simple. And it is simple. It really is. And so don't worry about the learning curve. Don't worry about all the anxiety. We're doing the work for you. And it needs, and again, tapping in to that child. We got to remember learning is fun. Even as adult, we got to learn how to make that fun again. And VR just does it naturally when done right.
You know, I fully agree. And both Karen and Lorelle, the concept around play, and even in adult education, it's to our peril when we don't include play. And play is nature's ingenious device that ensures everybody can achieve knowledge and wisdom, and to have those moments of joy and awe. And I appreciate also your discussion around story and narrative, and as you're talking, just the need to make learning come to life and be an experience and to be relational, that it isn't content to be consumed. It is our relationship with science, with social,
Absolutely.
with our world that we're in. And I think that in your chapter, it's quite an experience and it's quite a journey, and there's many gems to like pick up along the way. So I appreciate all the effort as the story unfolds, and it's there's magic there and wonder, but there is also like just really solid support for teachers and for designers and for developers, so where they might start. So again, in this book, we wanted to make a book so that folks don't have to start from the ground up, like you say, where teachers are, well, I'd love to try this, but where do I start? So we have lots of good examples there. And let's switch the topic now of discussion to some recommendations for designing. So some recommendations for using immersive learning. And, we've been talking about, we've got the Do model, the ADDIE model, we've got PEGS. So we have some good instructional design frameworks to guide us forward in a good way. But what are some more specific recommendations for teachers and designers who want to implement an immersive experience or even design their own? What are some things you'd recommend? And anyone can jump in.
Okay, well, I'd like to start. First of all, when we're working with educators in VR, when we're working with schools and teachers, the very first thing that they come to us with is, I need to get the headset. And I say, no, you don't. You can come in and explore VR in 2D. We call it the gateway drug, because the moment you go in and you look around on your monitor and you see this and you move around through the world, and especially when it's in a first person experience where your hands are on the screen, so you feel connected, you feel immersed. They're like, oh, I can't imagine what this looks like in VR. I need to go buy a headset. But don't wait for the headset. Jump. Just jump. And I wish more platforms, many platforms support 2D or desktop access, but we need to just jump and go in. And there's tons of examples. We've got Cellverse, we've got the Bee Thing. Is the Bee Thing open to the public yet? Or is
Yeah.
it just associated with that science, that museum?
Yeah, it's in the Science Museum. It's a prototype. We are looking forward to the second phase of the development. Yeah.
So, and I want this in every museum, don't you? I mean, we put on these things that we walk around the museum closed off because we have either a phone thing up to us or earphones in and we're not talking to each other. When you put it on a tablet and you hold it up, you can go, oh, look at that. Oh, look, and you get that engagement, you get that collaboration, you get the shared learning experience, which again, scaffolds as you share that experience. I love this. I want this in every museum. Of course, I'm biased.
Quincy, do you have any design strategies or instruction strategies for that you recommend?
Yeah, and I do have a few that I would suggest to the field. Is first of all, when you design immersive technology in your classroom or daily informal learning context, please put user or learners in mind first. And when you have learners in mind, then when you develop a user experience, you are stand at their point to look at the learning content. So that's why I suggest effective user experience assets or multimedia pieces is very important. Because when you create this very effective fun or outlooking or multimedia pieces, it also makes your design journey very fun and effective as well. Second, as Karen mentioned, that always having a narrative structure when you implement immersive technology, because the story, the narrative do shape people's learning experience and makes them excited. And particularly for science topic, it makes more interesting, right? Rather than a passive learner, it actually shifts them from passive into active. Another is very important is interdisciplinary collaboration. Sometimes the funding or resources is not there, but how you can form an effective team that work together and to reach the final design objective is very important. So for me, for my case, I recruited 2 undergraduate students who are in computing science. They are at their early career development, and they need these opportunities, and they're excited about this developing immersive technology for younger generation. So, and I taught them, mentored them, and we searched on so many different open source platform and come out the whole design structure. I mean, the whole process, I really, I feel grateful. And it's not only you as a researcher, you are in this, but also you mobilize the knowledge with developers, engineers. I mean, this is what I suggest.
Thanks, Quincy. And Karen, I'm going to give a shout out to you because of the very impactful worlds that you've built around environment and sustainability education. And that is how I first came to know about you. And you very graciously came to the very first class of a grad class that I was teaching and inspired the teachers through your story and through your narrative and through the fact it was very late in your part of the world, but you stuck around with us for 2 hours talking about your experiences designing virtual worlds, and you inspired those teachers, and they all went on to create their own worlds, and their worlds that also were for pro-social and environmental change. So here, what tips do you have to share with the rest of the world, especially those who might be new and not sure where to start out?
Well, when I was planning worlds, I kind of think about the audience that it'll be. So I kind of try to use different techniques for different worlds. So that really I'm kind of experimenting really with myself to see which worlds get the most kind of which formats people prefer. And because I actually haven't built that many worlds, I'm still kind of experimenting with that. And when I built the food-based world that you're talking about, I used a kind of a set pathway through the world with signs at every stage explaining about the the different issues that were going on through food waste, trying to take people on a journey from the the actual farm where the food's grown along to the kitchen where it's eaten and obviously wasted and on the farm, and then through to a landfill site to show what actually happens to all the food that's wasted because of our overconsumption. And then I go on to give people kind of tips, as it were, on how they can actually avoid food waste and do their own, through their own personal consequences, their own personal consequences on food waste, so that they can actually change what they do, and really to show the individual that their actions can actually change the world in a way. If it's multiplied by however many million people. So that was my sort of technique to get people through a story with, the problem, the consequences and the solution, what they can do about it. And a completely different world that I built was the ocean, where I was inspired to show, after looking at several lovely worlds in alt space of beautiful oceans with lovely fish swimming around everywhere, I not long after looking at these worlds, I actually saw a David Attenborough documentary about the ocean and how it really is in places. And I thought, well, I need to build a world to show that. So I built a world that showed, the devastation on marine life with the fish eating bits of plastic and sea creatures getting caught up in nets and getting their heads stuck in barrels and traffic cones and stuff like that. And I deliberately made that world with no signs at all, because I wanted people to kind of feel the experience, as it were, without being told about it, if that makes sense. I wanted them to kind of get the kind of shock factor with seeing all these poor little fish and everything caught up in all the garbage. But I put one sign in the world, which was a traffic sign. It was actually a stop sign, and I placed that on the bottom of the ocean where people kind of come across it, and it just says simply "stop." And I thought that had quite a good impact.
Yeah, these are excellent strategies for meaningful pedagogy, for impact. And I just want to highlight, this is also something why I am very passionate about meaningful, intentional, immersive education. Because, for instance, when you talk about the ocean experience, I live in a province in Canada that is landlocked. So all borders are, they're land borders. So how do students here learn about the problem of the plastic in the ocean? Like, how do they actually get to visualize it, experience it? 5 to 10 minutes in the ocean world you've built is just a very profound experience. And I have brought in many high school students into that world. And you really stop, that sign, you really have a moment to pause and slow down and think. And that is what well-designed virtual worlds can do for education. So thank you for sharing that. And Camilla and Meredith, what would you like to add?
Yeah, it's just wonderful to think about how Lorelle's talking about jumping right in. I love that idea. Or it's definitely what Quincy's talking about with starting with the learners. And Karen's two examples of those worlds are just inspiring. The things that I like to think about, and I actually partnered with a teacher who was doing VR in his school and had a very sustainable method of actually having his students review experiences and curate experiences and then help facilitate them with teachers. So the high school students were the tech support in some ways, which is one way that you can approach having and making VR sustainable. But a couple of things that I like to think about is this idea of keeping the learning goals in mind. Just as you're keeping the learners kind of at the forefront, making sure that you're thinking, okay, what are my goals for using this technology? And it might not be that immersive technology is the best to learn a specific thing. It's not an all, we use it anytime we can. There's a game called Killer Snails where they go in and out of VR and use it at specific points in that experience. And an example of a game that's doing really well and a wonderful experience. The other thing that also, so knowing the main affordances of what immersive learning can do, this idea of presence, feeling like you're in the world, and agency, feeling like you have control over the world and that you can interact with it. The other thing to keep in mind is this idea of equity, inclusion, and diversity and protection, making sure that you're always keeping those in mind. Right now, VR is not necessarily the most inclusive technology, but always thinking about how to make sure that we're encompassing the widest number of learners possible. And those are kind of some of the things that I think about when I think about virtual experiences. And I'm going to pass it to Camilla if you want to add things on.
Yeah, so two things that I think about that are, I think, really practical tips are one, when you're doing pre-training, preparing users for what they should expect in VR, especially for people who have never tried VR before. During my pilot study, a lot of people were like, this is my first time trying VR, and they seem really pumped about it. But if you don't prepare users for what they should expect in VR, it can be a very overwhelming experience, especially for first-time users. And I think another practical tip is dividing up learning sessions, or breaking up the experience into smaller parts, because a lot of people can actually get really nauseous when they're in VR for a long time. So providing breaks from the VR experience can also help the learners avoid nausea.
Thanks for sharing that. And just jumping in to add on, Meredith, you mentioned an example of where the high school students have the opportunity to be the tech support. So not everything relies on the teacher to be the expert. And we have a chapter in the book where the high school students, not only are they the tech support, but they also teach younger grades. So they're going in and becoming the experts. So in part of their high school learning experience, they are the teachers, and they created beautiful lesson plans that rival what teachers could create. Like, they're just really with it on their pedagogy, and they are training and teaching younger students. So there are all kinds of opportunities for equity, diversity, inclusion. There's challenges as well, I will admit that. But there are new opportunities that more students can have agency and unleash their creativity, incredible opportunities. I have done some work with grade 8 students using multi-brush and co-creating art together. And the comments on how VR just unlocks my creativity and empowers me, like, really impactful.
Oh, did we lose her? Hopefully she'll be back.
I think she'll be back. Oh.
She'll be back. I just like to add that one of the things we cover in the chapter is having, please, if you're a teacher, and hopefully I'm singing to the choir, and I think everyone in this panel agrees, let your students do their homework in VR. Accept it as just like you would a web page, a website, a paper, something like that. Make it easy for them to do it. I had a student that was given a fail for not, he created his homework. They were told to do it on a web page, a website, and he did it in WebXR, and the teacher failed him because it was technology the teacher didn't know. And it was like, no, it's not a web page. It is a web page. It just looks different. I think it's really important that we encourage it. One of the projects that I have done is I put legacy into each class. I let the students build a world for next quarter students. And then the next quarter students come in and they enhance that for the future students and the future students and the future students. So we're building, it's iteration, but we're building upon as the technology improves, evolves, and change, we can bring that in as well. So it is so important that we, take that to the next level. We have a picture of Karen on the face of Paul. There you go. We kept it going, Paul. It's all you.
Karen, you're not the only one with the internet challenge. I'm at my university plugged in, and here we are. Okay, so I was going to switch this to a new topic on tools. Like, what are different tools that you recommend? So from AR tools to VR tools to the web VR tools for teachers or students, so that they can design and create some of their own experiences.
Yeah, I would recommend for people very new to AR technology, they can use GatherVerse Studio. It is built specifically for AR content creation and give you very easy to control and design.
Thanks, Quincy. Has anyone been using Frame VR? What are thoughts around using Frame VR?
It's really, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I used it, but it's very amazing. I see this application is open source, free, and they keep it developing. I just checked that a few days ago, they added so many more new things. So wonderful, yeah.
What's amazing, not just Frame VR, but so many of the platforms, Spatial, Engage, Hubs, etc., are really stepping up and make it easier for teachers and students to do things. There's some learning curves, in UX and user experience and things that, which, our chapter and some of the other chapters in the book cover to help guide through that process. But and I encourage OpenBrush, which is the replacement for Tilt Brush. Blender is being taught now in middle school and high schools. I think it's awesome. Unity is as well. Those are skills that that when you learn like basic storyboarding, planning, organizing, you then convert that into a world. You get project management, you get a little Agile and Scrum thrown in automatically without saying we're going to teach you Agile and Scrum. You get, that layering process that creates organic learning is so important. And project management, which is essential in building in AR, building in VR, building in anything, that's a skill that transfers across everything. I was just teaching someone how to do that. And I said, let's talk about how you do your laundry and talk about that as a project management skill. It transfers everywhere. So I love that.
I think one of the ongoing themes is this idea of not being afraid to join the community of learners and learn alongside them. Because certainly one of the things we always talk about is how education is a resource poor setting. But the thing that we have the most of, the students are actually make it such a rich setting. And so being able to one of the things that that this teacher who I worked with, his name is David Kaiser, did was actually have students take the lead on projects, and students bring tools that could be used to build virtual worlds to the class and have them try it out together.
It gives a whole new meaning to show and tell, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. And just to unlocking the creativity, and I appreciate, Lorelle, how you bring up the project management skills, and then also how the technologies, they create these opportunities for students to collaborate. So I've had students collaborating together to create Frame VR projects that were like a class project. So we're not specifically talking about the collaboration, but there's a lot of group dynamics and personal social skills. Earlier today, one of the panelists was talking about soft skills as power skills. I love that. So that is, so they were learning a lot of these power skills, and it's the technology that facilitated that, because they have a goal together, a team goal, and they have to figure out how are we all going to contribute to this. So there's lots of other kind of learning that happens. It's the technology as a way to really bring out our humanity and to facilitate a lot of human connections and relationship building, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I'd also like to add, in addition to ZapWorks, check out Niantic's open source Lighthouse. This past year, the past summer, for the Unbox Festival in the UK, a team went in and took 15 different villages and created historical overlays to the villages. And you could do that in your own town. Have your students explore the history of it, find photographs and find those things, and actually create an app through Niantic's Lightship so that people can walk around and have these experiences right there on your phone. I think that's brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. And looking at the time, let's move on to a few rapid fire questions to wrap up our panel. What's the biggest misconception about immersive learning from your perspective? And Meredith, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I think the biggest misconception is that you have to have a ton of resources to start. And that's something that Lorelle mentioned. And this idea of just jumping right in, of finding a champion. If you're a teacher at a school, find somebody who can help you get the idea of virtual and immersive learning as a resource that you can happen. Use the resources that you have with you, whether it's students to learn more about it, or other teachers who might be interested in it. And I also think I mentioned this before, is that you don't necessarily need, immersive learning is great for some learning situations, but you always have to keep those learning goals in mind and making sure that you're matching the technology that you use for learning to what your learning goals are.
Anyone else? Camilla, do you have something to comment? What's the biggest misconception around immersive learning?
It's something that I mentioned before, but probably that that immersive, like VR by itself, can revolutionize education, and all you need is a VR headset and that's it. And I think a lot of people, I hear a lot of people say things like, oh, do you think like VR can replace teachers? That's like a very common question that I get. But I say no. I think, and I think VR, like Meredith said, is a very powerful tool, but we also need teachers, and we also need great instructional designers.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you'll see other examples in our book as well on how to integrate learning journals and other ideas for reflective practice and assessment. So it's a well integrated experience, and the immersive education is part of it, but there are other really important parts as well. So Karen, do you have what do you think the biggest misconception is about immersive learning?
Again, like people have said, I think it's probably the fact that they think there's so much resources needed. And there really isn't. It's also the cost. I think people think it costs a lot, but it doesn't. There's so much we can do that doesn't cost a lot.
Thanks for adding that. And we're going to move to another question. How can immersive tools enhance student creativity and unleash their imagination in the learning process? And Lorelle, let's let you take the lead on this one.
Oh, this is a simple one. Get out of their way. Seriously, I teach the teachers this. I mean, set them up well and then get out of their way, and don't judge them by your own preconceptions of what you want and what you don't, how it has to be this way. I keep thinking of that poor teacher who lost an opportunity to fail this brilliant kid who said, I'm going to do something that you're going to be seeing in 10 years just because you don't get this now. Not my problem, adapt, but get out of their way.
I love it. I love it. I think get out of their way and is just it's kind of a great way to end our panel in an inspiring way. And I think I would like to wrap up before we just before our time is ending. So thanks to all the panelists for sharing, and I do believe our book will be in the chat, but if not, Immersive Education, Designing for Learning, you'll find it and read the chapters and reach out to us anytime. We would be very happy and pleased to hear from you, and just wish you well on your journey for designing immersive learning. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everyone.
Paula.
Thank you. Thank you.